up this countdown at number 10, Tag. The opening scene of Tag is one of the most shockingly horrific moments in Japanese cinema, and is a perfect setup for the absolute carnage and confusion that follows. A young girl called Mitsuko finds herself battling between alternate realities, each with a unique set of horrors she must face. There is little to no explanation as the audience gets thrusted into a never-ending spiral of danger alongside Mitsuko, which makes the movie a heart-racing watch. Despite the endless world of horror seen in Tag, it is the true reality revealed at the very end that is the most terrifying. Now, if this movie name sounds familiar, it might be because the movie trended on TikTok around when it came out with the famously terrifying bus scene. We can unfortunately only show a short clip because it's from a movie, but does that scene not just give you goosebumps? Like, holy, talk about intense. Now at number 9, The Ghost of the Hunchback. Hajime Sato's 1965 Toei movie Heiden Samushi Atoko goes by several names in the West: The Ghost of the Hunchback, House of Terrors, and Satan's Pit. Regardless, they are all the same terrifying movie. The Ghost of the Hunchback is about a hunchbacked caretaker who presides over a forlorn mansion inhabited by the ghost of his previous masters. An unbelieving trio, a doctor, his assistant, and his niece, fail to heed the caretaker's warnings and are slaughtered horribly by the jealous occupants. Now moving on to number 8, The Curse. Fans of the found footage style horror need to look no further than Nori or The Curse. The film opens with an introduction to paranormal investigator Masafumi Kobayashi, who has disappeared during the process of making a documentary titled The Curse. The documentary then begins to play as viewers are left to uncover the secrets he left behind. Seemingly disconnected mysteries that involve strange and creepy events are tied together by the discovery of an old ritual that summons a demon named Kagutaba. Noroi is said to be disturbingly realistic, which makes it all the more terrifying. I found out the movie is free to watch on YouTube, but that's if you dare to watch this horrifying film. But it can also be found with better quality on Shudder. Now at number 7, House. The bizarre horror that is House is a hyperactive fever dream that takes place in the most deranged, creepy, haunted house to ever grace the big screen. Nobuhiko Obayashi's twisted fairy tale tells the story of 7 schoolgirls on a summer trip to an aunt's remote estate. The fantasy-like beginning takes a turn so deformed and uncanny that it's difficult to adequately describe. House is overflown with unbelievable scenes, people say. The scenes that take place in the haunted house are as gruesome, but they are just as exciting to watch. The movie came out in 1977. And nowadays, watching older horror movies don't really seem that scary because of all the CGI and everything we have now, but after seeing a 5-second clip of this movie, you're sure to have goosebumps. This movie is one of the most inventive and colorful horror movies to ever exist and truly must be seen to be believed. Now at number 6, Sadeko vs. Keiko. Yes, the vengeful ghosts of Ring and The Grudge are iconic, but if you've ever wondered which ghost is stronger, well, here's a movie that brings them together for the ultimate face-off and answers just that. We follow Natsumi, a woman who watches Sadeko's cursed videotape and realizes it's only a matter of time before Sadeko kills her. She tries to save herself by pinning Sadeko against Keiko, a malevolent spirit who resides in a haunted house, hoping they would kill each other and end the curse. The film takes the best parts of the two movies' antagonists and blends them together, capturing the dread and hostility perfectly. And funny enough, the movie seems very similar to Ring. Well, based on the trailer, that is, because I haven't seen the movie, but after seeing the spooky trailer, I might just have to give it a watch. It's creepy and fun and totally worth the watch, and the movie can be found on Amazon Prime, YouTube, and Shudder. Halfway at number 5, Uzumaki. Based on the horror mangaka Junji Ito's spine-chilling manga of the same name, this film's concept is just as eccentric as it is creepy. It's about a cursed town whose inhabitants are haunted by ominous spirals that drive the townspeople mad, and sometimes to the point where they take their own life. Our protagonists race to break the curse, but can it really be stopped? The strengths here are the ghastly body horror, the lack of standard backstory, lending to the sense of hopelessness, and the nightmarish, surreal imagery. A man crawls into a washing machine, people turn into snails, and your fingertips have spirals. Even the sky is cursed with spiral-like clouds. This is certainly not a town I'd personally want to live in, and based on the trailer, it looks very freaky and cryptic looking. At number 4, Dark Water. This is a classic that forever remains underrated and one of people's personal favorites. Yoshimi is a single mother in the midst of a divorce. To prove she is able to take care of her daughter, she moves the pair into an old rundown apartment building, where the haunting horrors begin. A dripping leak forms on the ceiling, a black tear appears in the tap water, and an extremely creepy child ghost. It's chilling with a touching mother-daughter relationship at its heart, but don't let that fool you because this movie is truly terrifying. And fun fact, this is based on a novel by Koji Suzuki, who is also the author of the Ring novels, and was directed by Hideo Nakata, who also directed the unbelievably famous and scary movie Ring. Some even say it's Japan's saddest horror movie. Here at number 3, Corpse Party. The movie Corpse Party is based on the horror video game series of the same name. There's also an anime and manga too. It's set in a haunted school and is incredibly dark and blood-curdling, which is right up the alley for most big horror fans. It has everything: blood, gore, mystery, and ghosts. A group of high school students perform a charm called Sachiko Ever After to ensure they'll remain friends forever. Instead, they find themselves transported to a haunted elementary school with resentful spirits and Sachiko herself, who's actually the psychopathic ghost of a little girl in a red dress. There's also an equally freaky sequel called Corpse Party Book of Shadows. Now coming in at number 2, Ring-You. Ring-You is a cult horror film of legendary status. Its prominence as one of the best horror films to come from Japan has not wavered over for more than 2 decades since its release. Ring-You subjects viewers to a deep-seated psychological tact that leaves them with a mysterious and lasting sense of doom. The story itself is deceptively unassuming. Watch a cursed videotape and die a gruesome death 7 days later. It's a masterful way director Hideo Nakata cloaks Ring-You in growing dread that makes it a superior film. The frightening jump cuts become implanted in your mind, and the metallic screeching will ring in your ears for days after watching. Of course, this one is good, but for me, I really like the newer remakes of Ring, but still, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend this one. Now coming in at number 1, The Grudge. It's impossible to talk about Japanese horror movies without mentioning Ju-on or The Grudge. The movie is disconnecting thanks to its non-linear narrative, but viewers can expect to encounter 2 terrifying restless spirits ready to torment anyone that enters their home. Everything about the film is sure to inflict sheer terror. The Grudge draws on horrors from both the real and paranormal, since the terrible crimes committed become the cause of the restlessly horrifying supernatural events. The creeping sense of a foreboding that builds throughout the movie lingers well after watching. I chose to put this at number 1 because I'm a big horror fan, but most horror movies don't actually scare me. But this one actually kept me up at night. I swear all I could hear when I tried to fall asleep was that creepy noise.
Number 10. The Little Mermaid. Disney has massively altered the original grim dark fable by Hans Christian Andersen, published in 1837. In the book, the nameless mermaid enters into a terrible pact. She allows her tongue to be cut out by a sea witch in exchange for legs. The witch ends up getting the Little Mermaid's sweet singing voice in return. Almost like the Disney version, but far worse. Once on land, the act of walking is extremely painful for the Little Mermaid, and the prince sees her as a kind of mute pet. She falls in love with him, but in the end, he marries someone else. The Little Mermaid learns her lesson and dies of a broken heart.
At a number 9 spot, we have Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a story of a wooden doll who is brought to life with the help of his friend Jiminy Cricket. Oh yeah, and if you haven't lived under a rock, you would know that when he lies, his nose gets bigger. Despite being a movie filled with good-hearted acts and heartfelt moments, the original story behind Pinocchio is much darker than that. The original writer Carlo Collodi had initially created the story of Pinocchio for Italian newspapers to show kids what would happen to them if they chose to act in any sort of rebellious way. In his iteration of Pinocchio, the doll is portrayed as a rebellious and annoying kid who is constantly being tortured in the story just for being bad. And for his green buddy, Jiminy Cricket, well, he was in the story as well and was giving Pinocchio some good advice, all until Pinocchio got mad and decided to smash him with a mallet. And an even darker twist to the tale, Pinocchio ends up being hung for the bad deeds he has committed. If we all knew about this, maybe the growing nose would not be as famous as it was.
Number 8. Snow White. In Little Snow White, as the original story was called, the evil queen asks the hunter to take Snow White into the forest to kill, as happens also in the movie. In the original version, the child is also only 7 years old, as opposed to Disney's 14-year-old. Neither seems old enough to consider marriage though. In the Grimm version, the queen orders the huntsman to bring back Snow White's internal organs, saying kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and liver back to me. He kills a boar instead and brings back the queen the boar's lungs and liver, which the queen thinks belongs to Snow White and so promptly eats. The cook had to boil them with salt, and the wicked woman ate them, supposing that she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. Snow White and the prince fall in love and get married even though Snow is only 7 years old, and the queen attends their wedding where she is met with her punishment of dancing to death. They put on a pair of iron shoes into burning coal, and they were brought forth with tongs and placed before her. She was forced to step into the red hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead.
At number 7 spot, we have The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This beloved Disney movie is set in 15th century Paris and follows the lives of a deformed bell ringer of Notre Dame cathedral, and his love interest La Esmeralda, who is a French Roma girl. This story with two physically appearing polar opposites combines tragedy with love and makes for a pretty good story in the end. But as for the others on this list, don't be deceived by the flashing lights and emotional stories, because its original depiction is one of the worst. The original story by Victor Hugo ends well for absolutely nobody in the movie. See, in the movie with Quasimodo and Frollo both fall in love with Esmeralda, but in Victor's story, Frollo frames Esmeralda for attempted murder and she gets sentenced to death by hanging. In both the movie and original story, Quasimodo beats Frollo, but in the original story, he gets pushed off a building because he's laughing hysterically at Esmeralda being hanged.
Number 6, we have Cinderella. We all know the classic story of Cinderella, but Cinderella doesn't actually have a fairy godmother. Rather, she plants a tree by her mother's grave and prays under it every day. She wears her dress to wear to each ball under the tree, and she's still helped by animals, though specifically birds, not mice. Also, she doesn't just lose her shoe because she's in a rush. The clever prince covers the steps in a pitch to make her stick to them, but she only loses a shoe in the process. One of Cinderella's evil stepsisters cuts off her toe and the other cuts off her heel so they can both fit into the tiny glass slipper. The prince is notified by the little doves that there's blood on the shoe, and he finally discovers the true owner is Cinderella. Once the stepsisters realize that, they try to favor Cinderella. They attend her wedding only to have their eyes pecked out by the little birds.
Right in the hub of our list, we have Pocahontas. This Disney movie portrays Pocahontas as being a free-willed woman whose best friend is a raccoon and her dad is a chief for her native tribe. The English arrive looking for gold and to claim territory, while Pocahontas finds her lover John, trying to bring peace to both sides. Classic native and early settler stuff, you know? And in the end of the movie, Pocahontas decides to stay with her tribe instead of going to England with John. However, the real story behind this is much more differently, so hopefully this doesn't ruin your childhood. In the original story, Pocahontas was never in love with John. In fact, she hated him with her guts because he would lie about everything that happened between the two. As mentioned in the movie, when John asked for Pocahontas to come back with him to England, she declines. But in the original story, John gets taken aback from this rejection, and this would ultimately lead to the Anglo-Powhatan Wars between the settlers of Virginia colony and the Algonquin Indians. Pocahontas would then get kidnapped and forced to indulge in English culture like Christianity and the English language. After a bit of time, she went back to her tribe in Virginia, but got really sick and passed away at the young age of 21. I told you I'd ruin it.
Number 4, Sleeping Beauty. In Gian-Battista Bastille's tale, which is the actual origin of Sleeping Beauty, a king happens to walk by Sleeping Beauty's castle and knocks on the door. When no one answers, he climbs up the ladder through a window and he finds the princess and calls her. But as she's unconscious, she does not wake up. He carries her to the bed and abuses her, then leaves. She awakens after she gives birth because one of her twins sucked the flax from the spindle out of her finger. The king comes back and they end up falling in love. However, the king is still married to someone else. His wife finds out and not only tries to have the twins killed, cooked, and fed to the king, but also tries to burn the princess at stake. Luckily though, she was unsuccessful. Then the king and the princess get married and they live happily ever after.
At our number 3 spot, we have Mulan. Mulan follows a young Chinese woman who looks to extend her boundaries and willingly disguises herself as a man to join the army to prove to her family and to herself that she can do anything she wants. In the war, she ultimately saves her father's life and brings honor to her family. After being told for over 1,500 years, the story has gotten extremely sugar-coated. Now in Hua Mulan's original poem, that which the movie is based on, it had them losing the war completely. The Khan allowed Mulan to live, but only if she lives with him, basically making her his own slave. So in the poem, she's as cunning as in the movie, and upon hearing this, she manages to escape and run back home. When she comes back home, however, she is met with the news that her father had passed away when she was gone and that her mother had remarried. The Khan then sends out men to find her, and as she finds no other solution to this problem, she takes her own life in order to be with her dad.
At number 2, we have Tangled. Tangled, it's a pretty loose adaptation of Rapunzel, but she ends up getting knocked up by the prince before they escape, and the evil sorceress figures it out. The sorceress cuts off Rapunzel's hair and throws her out into the wilderness. When the prince shows up to see her, the sorceress dangles Rapunzel's cut off hair to lure him in and tells him that he'll never see Rapunzel again. He ends up jumping out the window in despair and is blinded by the thorns below. He wanders around aimlessly, and Rapunzel ends up giving birth to twins, and he's eventually guided back to her when he hears her voice. Her tears restore his sight, then they return to the prince's kingdom and live happily ever after.
At our number 1 spot, we have Peter Pan. Peter Pan is about a magical boy who can fly without wings and fight without weapons. He travels from the Enchanted Isle of Neverland and various locations, all while being chased by his arch nemesis, Captain Hook. This movie is based on the story of J.M. Barrie. Peter Pan was actually based off of Barry's older brother, David. After an ice skating accident, his older brother David would tragically pass away, so he created Peter to keep the image of his brother alive. and he created the island of Neverland as a place for his brother to go to. This would have a lot of dark implications for the movie because Peter would always want to bring Wendy and her brothers to Neverland, and if Neverland is a place to go after you pass away, he's basically asking them to join him in the afterlife.
Starting off this countdown at number 10, The Impossible. This movie opens up with saying on December 26, 2004, the deadliest tsunami on record hit the southeast coast of Asia. The Impossible tells a true story of Spanish doctor Marina Bellon, who survived the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. The tragedy happened when she was on vacation in Thailand with her husband and their 3 sons. Maria got severely injured and nearly passed, but fortunately survived. While the movie's central is an English family, the Bennetts, who are actually Spanish in real life. Survivors of the disaster praised The Impossible for being so accurate and capturing the severity of what happened there. Screenwriter Sergio G. Sanchez worked closely with Maria to make sure that her story was told with the authenticity and respect it deserved, despite these notable changes, and I highly recommend this movie if you ever get a chance to watch it. Now at number 9, Poltergeist. In producer Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist, directed by Tobe Hooper, a PG-rated film that was so scary it helped create the PG rating in the first place. The Freeling family discovers the suburban home is built on a haunted burial ground and is now plagued by its violent spirits. While this movie takes place in California, the haunting that supposedly inspired its story originated in New York State. In 1958, in the town of Seaford, the Herman family claimed to be the victims of paranormal activities. They allegedly saw bottle tops pop off on their own, along with those bottles seemingly moved by an invisible hand. Their claims went viral and dominated local and national news cycles, to the point where Life magazine did a piece on it. Like the Freelings, the Hermans also invited paranormal specialists into their suburban home to deal with what the supposed experts claimed to be a legit poltergeist. While these researchers were able to record some evidence of strange events, the occurrences stopped shortly after the team arrived. Number 8, Open Water. Open Water created many shocking headlines and a mini controversy when it arrived in theaters in the wake of a based on real events marketing campaign. The low-budget film, which featured a young couple in an ocean teeming with sharks, was famous for its use of real sharks to add a more real-life look and home video aesthetic. The sharks used in the filming of Open Water were as real as those that threatened the film's source material. American tourists Tom and Eileen Lonerang. They were in fact left behind on a scuba diving trip off the Great Barrier Reef. It took 2 days for the scuba diving company to even realize that the couple did not return with everyone else, and the couple, like their big screen counterparts, were never found. Number 7, The Strangers. Directed by Brian Bertino, The Strangers is a lean and mean piece of horror that 3 masked strangers who terrorize an estranged couple, played by Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, simply because they happen to be home. The group determines that the couple is around when one of the members knocks on their door and asks, "Is Tamara home?" That's all the invitation these invaders need to begin their horrific and messed up game of cat and mouse. Chillingly, this actually happened to Bertino when he was a child. Someone knocked on his front door asking for someone who didn't live there. He later learned there was a series of break-ins in his neighborhood around the same time. The robbers would target houses where no one answered the door. He also said that the film was inspired by the Manson family murders. While Bertino has never confirmed this theory, many viewers also speculate that the film is based on the Ketty murders, an unsolved homicide in which a family of 3 and a friend were brutally stabbed and beaten until they passed away in their cabin in Ketty, California. Number 6, 127 Hours. The protagonist of 127 Hours is Aaron Ralston, who's best known for surviving a canyoning accident by cutting off his own arm with a pocket knife. He initially got his arm trapped between a boulder and the side of a canyon wall after an unlucky fall. After 5 days of being trapped, he managed to amputate his limb to get free and find rescue. He later wrote about this experience in his book that is fittingly named Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Ralston stated that most of the film is so factually accurate that it is close to a documentary as you can get and still be a drama. And this movie stars James Franco, where he plays the main character amazingly. Halfway, number 5, The Amityville Horror. Stuart Rosenberg's 1979 film The Amityville Horror is based on the 28-day haunting of the Lutz family. In both real life and the film, the previous owners of the Lutz's new home were executed in their beds by their son, Ronald, 2 years before the Lutz clan moved in. When Kathy Lutz brought in a priest to bless the home, he heard a voice loudly declare, "Get out." The events became progressively worse, and the family smelled foul odors and observed other bizarre activities. The Lutz family claims the actual events were too horrifying to discuss. The infamous Ed and Lorraine Warren, who also make a few other appearances on this list, were even involved in the investigation, making claims that the whole thing was fake. The Amityville Horror is still, however, thought to be a hoax due to lack of evidence, but Rosenberg didn't care about that. Regardless of what is true, it's one scary concept. The film did take some liberties, however, having George become completely possessed and pushing him to the brink of committing horrible acts similar to Ronald's. Number 4, Jeepers Creepers. Jeepers Creepers has a complicated and upsetting history. The plot of a supernatural horror movie is based on a real-life murder mystery that was featured on an episode of the true crime show Unsolved Mysteries. On Easter Sunday, April 15th, 1999, siblings Ray and Marie Thornton went on a drive as they often did to pass the time. They noticed an aggressive man driving a truck with a particular license plate. They saw the same truck a few miles later at a church and noticed the driver looked like he was disposing of a body wrapped in a bloody sheet. The siblings called the police and it turned out that they were right. The driver was Dennis DePue and he was getting rid of the body of his wife of 18 years, Marilyn DePue. Dennis then passed away by taking his own life while trying to be apprehended by police. While it may not have much to do with the plot of the movie, there's also the disturbing fact that the director of Jeepers Creepers is a convicted person that often hurts children. What's even worse is that the boy he was convicted of preying on was a child actor from his first film, Clown House. Number 3, Apartment 407. Based on a true story that happened in London, England back in 2005, Apartment 407 is the harrowing true story about Isabel, a fitness instructor living with her husband and a young child who one day meets a seemingly charming man named Peter at a local restaurant, who invites her to a modeling job interview. Against her better judgment, Isabel goes to the location of an apartment building in downtown LA, and before long she's abducted, drugged, and held captive in a room by Peter and his unseen associates who sell her as an intimacy slave of various high-paying clients. For 3 days and 2 nights, Isabel endures physical and mental torture in the forms of assault, drugs, and other humiliations before she conjures up a plan to escape in order to save her own life. The story is about Frida Farrell, who plays Isabel in the movie. If that doesn't make sense, I'll explain it to you. This horrible situation happened to Frida, who decided that she wanted to share her story in the form of a movie, but instead of hiring an actress to play her in the situation, she just decided to do it herself. She had this torturous thing happen to her and then reenacted all of it for the movie. If she isn't Superwoman, I don't know who is. At the end of the movie, it showed her escaping, but when police went to arrest the man who held her, he was gone, and to this day he is yet to be found. Number 2, 13 Lives. Ron Howard's 13 Lives is now streaming on Amazon Prime Video. It is a tale almost too extraordinary to be true, but it is a very accurate dramatization of the Tham Long Cave rescue in Thailand in 2018. In total, there were 12 boys aged 11 to 16 and the team's assistant coach exploring the cave before bad weather conditions caused the cave to flood and blocked their way out. They became trapped, and after a parent of one of the boys reported that he had not come home, a rescue operation was organized. The rescue gripped the world and saw a team of almost 10,000 volunteers from 17 different countries to help out. The acting talents of the movie have been stressed to the difficulties of making this film. It is an important story to tell though, and the final product is as gripping as it is heartfelt. There was a great cause for concern when the boys' clothes, shoes, and bikes were discovered just outside the cave's entrance, with no sign of them. Over the first couple of days, Thai Navy SEAL divers were called in. More flooding blocked vital areas, and water pumps were used to pump out gallons of water. I haven't seen this movie, but after watching the trailer, it looks terrifying and I might just have to watch it. Now coming in at number 1, The Conjuring. The true story of The Conjuring is actually rooted in a horrifying true experience of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The true story of The Conjuring begins with the first film, which focuses on the Perron family. In January 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange things happening almost immediately after they moved in. It started small. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from place to place on its own. She would hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when no one was in there. The girls began to notice spirits around the house. Though for the most part they were harmless, there were a few, however, that were angry. Carolyn allegedly researched the history of the home and found out that it had been the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had passed away under horrible circumstances. Several of the children had drowned in a nearby creek, one was executed, and few of them hanged themselves in the attic. The spirit that was depicted in the film, Bathsheba, was said to be the worst of them all. She was rumored to have been a Satanist, and there was evidence that she had been involved in the passing of a neighbor's child, and so much worse. And I could stand here all day and talk about the story of The Conjuring, but we don't really have time for that today.
At number 10 spot, we have Pazuzu from The Exorcist. You know we have to start this list with one of the most iconic horrors of all time, 1971's The Exorcist. Although this movie is known worldwide, many don't know who the bad guy truly is, other than the fact that he's a demon and that he's bad. So for some demon education, let me just explain. The main antagonist of the Exorcist movie is Pazuzu, who is considered the king of all demons in the underworld, according to Assyrian and Babylonian mythology. In legend, Pazuzu is depicted as a human-like figure with a scorpion's tail, wings, claws, and always has his right hand pointing upwards and his left hand downward. But in more popular culture, he's depicted as one of these. And I gotta say, this has gotta be one of the most vampire-looking demons out there. In legend, Pazuzu was created originally as an angel, but when the whole God vs. Lucifer incident happened, he joined the dark forces, and he, along with all of Lucifer's friends, were banished. And need I mention, this demon is specifically known for his possession abilities, and this is ultimately how the movie Exorcist happened. 12-year-old Regan McNeil using the Ouija board, then boom. At number 9 spot, we have Bagul from The Sinister. Bagul, or Mr. Boogie, or Eater of Children. Okay, that name is kinda direct. Well, this demon plays the bad guy in the 2012 horror film Sinister and its prequel, Sinister 2. Yeah, he doesn't die in the first one. Sorry for the spoilers. In the movie, he's able to move across different realms and can teleport anywhere by just using images of himself. But apart from the horrible deeds he's committed, like his many videos like Pool Party 66 and Lawn Work 86, people still don't know who Bagul really is, and quite honestly, I don't even know, because Bagul relates to so many different deities that I had to do my research. The closest one Bagul could resemble is Moloch, which is the ancient pagan god of child sacrifice, and many others claim that Bagul is the close brother of this god. I mean, it would make sense. In medieval times, many worshipped this Canaanite deity who is all about child sacrifice. This statue was said to have 7 chambers within, one being for sacrificing children. In all honesty, Sinister was a really good horror movie, and props to this great iteration of Moloch in the flesh. At number 8 spot, we have Deadites in Evil Dead. Look at these. Look at these. In the original 1981 Sam Raimi's version, we were introduced to the Deadites. These were considered to be demonic zombies, just in case a regular zombie or a regular demon wasn't enough. They went along and mixed the two together. And to make things even worse, they were possessed by these Cardanian demons that could basically touch anything, and they would be able to have complete possession over it. Imagine just going up to different people and just touching them, and you're able to possess their living souls. This strength alone gives them a spot on this list. Among their other strengths, they also work as a hive mind, as you notice from the demons saying "we" a lot. This means they all work under the same user of the Book of the Dead. So basically, if one is seeing you, all of them are. At number 7 spot, we have Valak from the Conjuring universe. Perfectly portrayed by Bonnie Aarons, Valak is a powerful demon that manifests as a demonic nun to both mock the faith of its enemies and to hide among them. It also hides the title as the arch enemy of the Warrens. Lorraine Warren in particular, with the rivalry starting when she exorcised it from Maurice towards the end of its original film. Valak is a very wicked, ruthless, sadistic, cold, and completely despicable demon. She's a complete menace and very scary. Almost forgot to mention, I mean, look at this. That scene shook me in the theaters, and I won't even lie. Apart from the film, Valak exists in past mythology as well. Valak is known as the great president of hell, with over 30 legions of demons at his command. Valak manifests as an angelically winged boy riding a 2-headed dragon, and it possesses the power to find treasures. In the case of the film, Valak's treasure was the vision of Ed Warren being impaled, which it offered to his wife Lorraine as a gift. At number 6 spot, we have Payment from Hereditary. If you haven't seen this movie, go give it a try. I feel like it's one of those horror movies where you need to show someone who's just getting into the genre, except for the fact that someone gets decapitated. Yeah, about that. 2018's Hereditary is a horror movie that gives a sense of realism on a human level. Doesn't even need jump scares, but instead it uses the ambience in the story to carry its unsettling story. At the end of the story, we see the son summoning Payment in order to possess his body and walk the earth. So who is Payment? Well, let me say King Payment. He is considered Lucifer's most obedient devil, which is also the reason he has 200 legions of demon under his rule. He's often depicted on top of his camel wearing a crown made with precious stones. He's also believed to be one of the best teachers of arts, philosophy, and sciences, which is another reason why he so easily has access to humans and is able to possess them with ease. In the hump of our list, we have Krampus. Every single December, all families come together and they anticipate the arrival of Saint Nicholas, aka the one and only Santa. As we all know, Santa rewarded those who acted good, but what really happened to those who acted bad? Not just the Cole story. This is where this guy comes in. Krampus appears as a tall, hairy beast with hooves and the horns of a goat. This Christmas demon is celebrated in some countries around the world, including Germany and Australia. And on December 5th, people dress up as this devil and chase naughty children around, which is like Halloween with a menacing twist. And talking about twists, many other tales of Krampus speak of him kidnapping naughty children, later taking their lives and eating them. At number 4 spot, we have the Balrog from the Lord of the Rings. I was way too excited to mention this beast since Lord of the Rings is my favorite trilogy of all time. Debate me, I dare you. So in Lord of the Rings mythology, Balrogs were originally considered to be Maiar, which were these angelic spirits existing before time itself. This is all due to Eru Ilúvatar, who is basically the god of this universe. So all was good, and then came along a guy named Melkor, who is basically Sauron's teacher. He decided to corrupt and deceive the Maiar until they joined his rebellion against Eru Ilúvatar. So once they took human form, they appeared as these terrorizing humanoid fire beasts known as the Balrog, which directly translates to the demon of might. The Balrog we do see in the Fellowship of the Ring was named Durin's Bane, who is basically responsible for many deaths of dwarves in the kingdom of Khazad-dûm. All the way at number 3 spot with Abalan from The Last Exorcism. The Last Exorcism, which was released in 2010 and directed by Daniel Stam, is one of the most iconic demonic possession movies of all time. This movie is about a religious minister who is struggling both financially and mentally. So he decides to shoot a documentary to expose the fraud within his very own ministry, except what he finds out is something a lot more real. This is when he decides to help a fellow follower named Louis Sweetser who believed his daughter was possessed. When they arrived, she was actually possessed and shit hit the fan really quick. The demon that presented in the movie is Abalam. So remember the payment demon I mentioned in Hereditary? Well, this guy is always close by to that guy because it's believed if you summon payment, Abalam will appear beside him once you have given a sacrifice or other offering. At number 2 spot, we have the lipstick demon from Insidious. Insidious was a fresh horror movie in a time where horror movies became repetitive and predictable. Its use of sound was surprising to many, and I don't know about you, but the intro that shows the word Insidious in all red with the loud music actually scared me so much. Now onto the lipstick demon, otherwise known as the man with fire in his face, is the main villain of Insidious. He is played by American composer and actor Joseph Bishara. This demon is a monstrous and sinister creature, tall and gaunt with a dark humanoid figure. Most of his body is black as coal with long spider-like fingernails, hooves, and a long forked tail. His head is mostly bald except for long tufts of hair around his ears. Although he does not wear any sort of clothing, he often wears silvery metallic claws over his own fingers. But what's more creepy, other than the fact that he can possess the living, is that he loves the Tiny Tim song, Tiptoed Through the Tulips. So play a little bit of a snippet for me. At number 1 spot, we have the Mammon from Constantine. So this is Lucifer's son. Need I say more? Well, if anyone hasn't watched the movie Constantine, Mammon attempted to make our human world his own personal kingdom, and he planned an invasion using many of his demons from hell. He is Lucifer's son, so he can do whatever he wants basically. Except that very fact that he was Lucifer's son was the reason he was stopped in the first place. So there's that. He is the high prince of the 7 princesses that make up hell, and it would make sense that he is also the strongest one in hell apart from his father Lucifer. He is considered to represent wealth, as his name in Hebrew means money, and he is referenced many times in the Bible for being the opposite to seeking for God's wisdom and his likeness.
Starting off the list at number 10, we have Sinister's Bughuul. Bughuul is an obscure pagan deity that feeds on children, serving as their main antagonist of the movie Sinister. He would manipulate the lives of children, have them kill their families, and then consume the child's soul. Starting from 1966, Bughuul would manipulate the minds of children into killing their families, filming the murders on a Super 8 film reel, and each film would consist of innocent-looking clips taken of the family, then the murders would be filmed. In the extended ending section, the child would come closer to the camera before making a scary gesture. Bughuul would make a very subtle appearance in each of the films. The first one is The Pool Party in 1966. In this whole movie, a family is seen playing in a swimming pool. Then the film cuts to the pool at night with each member of the family strapped to pool chairs. The filmmaker then pulls a rope, pulling each of the pool chairs into the swimming pool, leaving the family to drown to death.
At a number 9 spot, we have Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Pennywise is truly one of the most iconic villains in horror movie history. Introduced in Stephen King's It, Pennywise is a shape-shifting creature who is billions of years old. But don't let his old age fool you, because he terrorized the children in town of Derry every 27 years to feed off their souls. But since we both have the 1990 version and the 2017 version of Pennywise, I think it's best to look at both of them and why they work. In my opinion, the 90s version of Pennywise, played by the great Tim Curry, seems more creepy with a hint of serial killer vibes. This version actually looks like he is enjoying himself a bit too much. The 2017 version of Pennywise, played by Bill Skarsgård, has a more monster and demonic feel to it. You can feel the lust it has to feed on children. It gets pretty scary at times when this Pennywise lurks in the shadows like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. Both Pennywise are amazing in their own movies, but I really just couldn't put one above the other. They're just too good.
Cloverfield, 1/18/08. wait, it might ring a bell. But these monsters were definitely scary. In the movie, the monster came from the Atlantic Ocean, where it was awakened by a submarine sent down from a Japanese station. The monster rampages through Manhattan, destroying the city in its path. This destruction causes the United States government to sacrifice New York City in an attempt to kill the monster with heavy ordinances in the Hammer Down Protocol. The monster is about 300 feet and it has a huge fin tail. The utmost double-jointed limb pair is longer than the other two, ending with a multi-fingered hand which can bend backwards so that the creature can walk on its fingers. The double-jointed squat legs are powerful enough to support the creature's mass, and yet still allow it to move quickly through the city. Each of its feet is about 40 feet in length, roughly the size of the city's transit bus.
At a number 7 spot, we have the lipstick-faced demon from Insidious. Insidious was a fresh horror movie in a time where horror movies became repetitive and predictable. Its use of sound was surprising to many. I don't know about you, but the intro that shows the word Insidious in all red with the loud music actually scared me so much. Now on to the lipstick demon, otherwise known as the man with fire in his face. He is the main villain of Insidious. He is played by American composer and actor Joshua Bishara. This demon is a monstrous and sinister creature, tall and gaunt with a dark humanoid figure. Most of his body is black as coal with long spider-like fingernails, hooves, and a long forked tail. His head is mostly bald except for long tufts of hair around his ears. Although he does not wear any sort of clothing, he often wears silvery metallic claws over his own fingers. Yup, pretty creepy.
At number 6 we have The Thing. The Thing is an extremely hostile, shape-shifting extraterrestrial organism and the primary antagonist of the 1982 science fiction film The Thing. The Thing has the ability to assimilate other life forms in order to survive and spread. The original physical characteristics of The Thing and its motivations are unknown, as it could have assimilated hundreds, if not thousands of other species before it crashed on Earth. Unlike most creatures, The Thing possesses no inherent standard autonomy. The Thing has the ability to reconstitute itself following immense damages, and it's invulnerable to most conventional forms of attack. However, it is vulnerable to the fire and potentially molecular acid, since they both destroy the creature at its cellular level.
Right in the Humber list, we have the crawlers from Descent. This race of cave-dwelling humanoids, located in a cave in North Carolina, have adapted to complete darkness, and it's said that they lost any previous traces of humanity they may have once had, which turned them into these monsters. These monsters are what makes this movie so horrifying. Their unpredictable nature, along with their bloodlust, makes them a reasonable candidate on this list. The movie has a group of female explorers that decide to go on a cave exploration only to be met with these scary guys. This movie gets bloody and pretty gory, so don't act like I didn't warn you. Their abilities include climbing on walls, superhuman speed, strength, and echolocation, since they are blind creatures.
At number 4 we have Prometheus. The Hammerpede is the nickname given to the cobra-like creatures seen in Prometheus. Though not technically a new creature, the Hammerpedes were once a result of worms being dragged into the dark liquid. I don't think these were indigenous worms either. It was a result of David dragging them into the chamber under his feet from the Prometheus ship. The dark liquid mutated the worms to create these aggressive snake-like creatures. In the film, Fifield and Milburn get lost in the temple after the others have returned to the Prometheus ship.
At number 3 spot, we have Valak the Nun. Portrayed by Bonnie Aarons, Valak is a powerful demon that manifests as a demonic nun to both mock the faith of its enemies and to hide among them. It also holds the title as the arch enemy of the Warrens. Lorraine Warren in particular, with the rivalry starting when she exorcised it from Maurice towards the end of its original film. Valak is a very wicked, ruthless, sadistic, cold, and completely despicable demon. She's a complete menace and is very scary. Almost forgot to mention, I mean, look at this. That scene shook me in the theaters, I won't lie. Apart from the film, Valak exists in past mythology. Valak is known as the great president of hell with over 30 legions of demons at his command. Valak manifests as an angelically winged boy riding a two-headed dragon, and it possesses the power to find treasures. In the case of the film, Valak's treasure was a vision of Ed Warren being impaled, which it offered to his wife Lorraine as a gift.
Here at number 2 we have the Babadook. The Babadook is summoned when a 6-year-old Samuel Vanek discovers a mysterious book in the shelf titled The Babadook, also known as the Babadook book. After pleading with his mother Amelia to read it to him, she finally gives in and they open it up. It's seemingly a children's pop-up book, but with each page being more disturbing than the last, Samuel gets so frightened and ultimately awakens the dark being within the story. The Babadook, like the boogeyman, seems to feed off fear. It might be said that, in the context of the film, the Babadook is the boogeyman for Samuel and his mother. The being gets stronger the more you think of it, eventually to the point where it can manifest into something physical. It is possible to be possessed by the Babadook, as Amelia does in the second half of the film. When in this state, she becomes hostile, aggressive, succeeding in killing the family dog and attempt to kill her own son.
Taking our number 1 spot, we have Samara from The Ring. This movie made many of us keeping a light on at night, and for me, it made me scared of a TV showing static because that's how Samara attacks. Initially, Samara appears as a pretty and young girl with brown eyes. In addition to these features, she has long brown hair and fair skin, and she wore a white nightgown. Except when she's out here tormenting and hunting people, otherwise known as her cursed form, Samara's hair is now dark, soaking wet, which hides her waterlogged and deformed face when she got pushed down a well and left to pass away there. To get her into the cursed form, it's said that you need to watch a cursed film of hers in which you will get a call with a raspy voice saying 7 days. She is noteworthy among other horror villains for she wields no distinctive weapon, only kills her victims off screen, and her killing methods are purely psychological in nature rather than physical, and remains completely enshrouded with mystery and speculation. She's still creepy to me till this day, and if I ever see static on my TV, I will always think of her.
Starting off this countdown at number 10, His House. Nothing sucks the energy out of horror than movies that withhold on horror. Movies can scare audiences in a variety of ways, of course, but at the very least, a horror movie can be scary instead of messing around. Remy Weeks' His House doesn't mess around. The film begins with a tragedy, and within 10 minutes of that opening scene, it outgrudges The Grudge by leaving ghosts scattered on the floor and across the stairs where its protagonist can trip over them. Ultimately, this movie is about the inescapable grief of immigrant stories, a companion piece to contemporary independent cinema. Weeks is deeply invested in Bowl and Rial as people, in where they come from, what led them to leave, and most of all, what they did to leave. But Weeks is equally invested in making his viewers leap out of their skins, so ultimately their choice ends up being stay with the supernatural creature inhabiting their home, or go back to where they are from where war is happening. What would you do? If you're looking for a movie to give you the chills this Halloween, then you should for sure watch this one. Number 9, The Conjuring. James Wan has staked out a place among the modern masters of horror, directing films like Saw, Dead Silence, Insidious, and this inspired by true events chiller based on the experiences of real-life paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens, best known for their work on the strange case that inspired the Amityville horror movies, which played a part in The Conjuring 2, were portrayed by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, who grounded the effective jump scares and freak-out moments with a believable world weariness. Together, Wan and his co-leads found fresh terror in familiar genre tropes, and the end result is a sprawling cinematic universe that only continues to grow. Number 8, It. For some, Tim Curry will always embody Pennywise the Dancing Clown, a manifestation of fear itself. But in this 2017 adaptation of Stephen King's epic novel, replanted in the 1980s instead of the 50s, it's Bill Skarsgård who scares you witless. As Pennywise, Skarsgård's eyes roam in 2 different directions, making the character look truly monstrous and deranged. When he interacts with the children, he drools, as if starved, ravenous to consume them in their fear. Great performances from the young cast also prevent any child acting awkwardness, while the themes of friendship and the loss of innocence are reminiscent of Stand By Me, another King adaptation, and E.T. It might be sentimental at times, but when it scares, it really does scare. It's a chilling reminder that no matter your age, clowns are always terrifying. Number 7, A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place follows a family's attempts to survive in a post-apocalyptic world patrolled by an alien species that hunts by sound, like some kind of satanic land dolphin. In many ways, it's the opposite of a Michael Bay movie. Instead of noise, there's silence. Instead of berserk action, there's stillness. It just makes the experience all the more terrifying. Actor turned first-time director John Krasinski shows an almost Hitchcockian command of attention at the slightest creak, or spillage can bring slathering hell beasts raining down from the surrounding countryside. Emily Blunt, meanwhile, steals the show in front of the camera. The childbirth scene in particular will never leave you. Number 6, Get Out.
Get out! Yo! Yeah!
Horror films at their best are when fear stems from the human condition itself. It's what makes Jordan Peele's Get Out one of the most essential cinematic outings in recent memory. Starring British actor Daniel Kaluuya as Chris, a photographer accompanying his white girlfriend, Williams, for a weekend with her parents that turns sour. The film's terror comes from the mirror it holds up to society's continuing threat of racism. Utilizing the horror trope of isolated suburbs, Peele subverts expectations, distinctively carving out a new niche in the genre that's equal parts horror, comedy, and social commentary. Halfway at number 5, 1BR. In the middle of a horrifying housing crisis, 1BR holds up a mirror to the isolation and desperation crushing the greater population of Los Angeles. Hollywood and the surrounding areas may be viewed globally as a home for rich people, but the majority of Los Angeles County lives closer to the poverty line than the shoreline. These extreme levels of impoverishment come with about 24 cults masquerading as subculture, a mortifying picture of codependency, a coerced dismissal of personal rights, and loneliness. Sarah, who recently moved to Los Angeles, needs to find a place to live. She also needs to get into college. Oh, and Sarah needs to figure out how to navigate her uptight boss. She's the blueprint for every mid-20s late bloomer. The apartment hunt has been a nightmare with limited funds, but then she finds the perfect apartment. The space is close to work, affordable, and comes with one extremely cute neighbor. Unfortunately, the property is owned by a cult, obsessed with making a perfect community. Prone to extreme measures, the group, known only as CDE Properties, watches the little colony 24 hours a day. Their tried and true method of converting new tenants includes sleep deprivation, solitary confinement, and threats of extreme pain. Sarah does her best to resist these tactics while simultaneously convincing her captors that she's becoming one of them. In this feature film debut, writer-director David Marmore crafts a chilling survival story in the sun-bleached desert and stark fluorescent lighting of wearisome offices. With incredible performances, a solid twist, and the possibility of a franchise sequel, 1BR aims high. The good news is the film hits a lot of targets. Number 4, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, from the director of Troll Hunter and The Autopsy of Jane Doe, received something of a mixed but straight up response from critics and horror fans, who praised its visual and creature designs, but largely criticized its choice to embark on a "the stories are coming to life" storyline, rather than simply adapting some of the more popular stories from Alvin Schwartz's classic books in a more anthology-based format. It made for an experience that was often compared to the Goosebumps film series, particularly in its approach to bringing younger audiences into the horror genre. How effectively the film actually managed to adapt the infamous illustrations of Stephen Amell is another matter of considerable debate, but you can't really fault the effectiveness of something like The Pale Woman, which is suitably hideous. Number 3, Sinister. Before he joined the MCU in 2016's Doctor Strange, director Scott Derrickson had racked up a few horror films, a couple of which earned cult followings. One of them was a small-scale haunted house possession story about a true crime writer, Ethan Hawke, who moves his wife and kids into a house where a family was murdered, only to discover the new place might already have a rather evil tenant. Writer C. Robert Cargill was reportedly inspired to pen the script based on the nightmare he had after watching The Ring, and the story does share a minor similarity with that film, what with the creepy snuff film angle. But for many who saw it, the dramatic reveals and creepy set pieces far outweighed any recycled genre tropes that might have been present. Plus, there's at least one report out there that says it's the scariest movie ever made, so that must count for something. Number 2, Us. Yes, another Jordan Peele movie, but he has made some good ones. Us is about the mother of a family who finds themselves under the attack of a mysterious group of strangers that are their exact doppelgangers. This movie is great. It has gore, jump scares, twists, mystery, everything. I remember watching this movie back when it first came out, and it had me absolutely terrified. So I would for sure recommend this movie, and oh my gosh, just wait for the twist at the end. Now coming in at number 1, Terrifier 2. A horror film written and directed by Damien Leone follows a resurrected Art the Clown that is looking to terrorize a teenage girl and her younger brother on Halloween night. Now it sounds scary, but doesn't seem too bad, right? Now, as I didn't personally find that one all that scary, there have been reports of people needing to call an ambulance after watching this movie. People throwing up, hyperventilating, and one case of a heart attack. One person shared to Twitter, "My friend passed out and the theater called an ambulance. Highly recommended." However, the extreme reactions sparked the director to tweet out to fans, to everyone saying that the reports of people fainting and puking during screenings of Terrifier 2 is a marketing ploy. I swear on the success of the film, it is not. These reports are 100% legit. I wish we were smart enough to think of that, but then again, we didn't need to. The producer had also shared a warning statement. Warning: this movie contains scenes of graphic violence and brutal depictions of horror. Viewers who are faint of heart, prone to lightheadedness, or of weak stomachs are advised to take extreme caution. There have already been numerous instances of fainting and vomiting in theaters. For those choosing to continue, you have been warned.
At number 10 spot, we have Scream in 1996. At a time when the slasher genre was dying, Scream came in and completely 180'd the way we look at slasher films. I mean, in the beginning of the film, we believed that Drew Barrymore was the main protagonist protagonists of the film, but then in the next few minutes we begin to see that it's simply not the case. As mentioned, they weren't like any other horror films at the time. It was one of the first times where we gained the concept of 2 killers instead of 1, and despite being horrific and scary in some parts, it showed lots of self-parody. The movie poked fun at a lot of the ongoing and repetitive actions done in previous horror and slasher films, but they did it without going over the top, and it was just perfect. On top of that, Ghostface as a villain was very unique to many viewers. Opposed to the other overpowered villains who don't seem to put any effort to killing, Ghostface was fast, but he was also very clumsy, almost showing that he's desperate to capture his victims. Basically, Scream saved the horror genre when it was in the trenches in the 90s, so this film will always remain iconic. At number 9 spot, we have Paranormal Activity. Whether you think about it now, Paranormal Activity belongs on the Mount Rushmore of all horror movies. When this movie first came out, everyone and their mother knew about it. It was such a hit, it ended up totaling around $193 million at the box office with only a $15,000 budget. After its release in 2007, everyone witnessed a new type of horror in the movie realm, something that almost looked real and something that made us wonder if these paranormal events could happen to us. If you haven't watched the movie, it follows a young couple and their experiences into moving to a new home in San Diego. After only a few days, Katie believes an evil spirit that has haunted her in the past is now back in her new home. So the husband sets up these infamous cameras around the house to record the paranormal activity, and the rest is history. Number 8, The Conjuring. The true story of The Conjuring begins with the first film, which focuses on the Perron family. In January 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-house farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange things happening almost immediately after they moved in. It started small. Caroline would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to have moved from place to place on its own. She would hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen when no one was there. The girls began to notice spirits wandering around the house, though for the most part they were harmless. There were a few, however, that were very angry, and this movie showcased all of that. At number 7 spot, we have The Grudge. This sound is the last thing you want to hear before encountering the enraged spirit known as The Grudge. The movie is very well known globally, with different iterations in both Japanese and English. The Japanese one was named Ju-on, The Grudge, and was released in 2002. Then 2 years later on in 2004, The Grudge was Americanized and released all over theaters in North America. Despite some backlash, it would go on to gross $187 million from only a $10 million budget. And although many argue that the Japanese one was better, I personally believe that both have their top spots in the horror genre. Everything about the film is sure to inflict sheer terror. The Grudge draws on horrors from both the real and paranormal. The Grudge is essentially a cursed spirit who is usually someone who passed away from something very tragic, causing them to come back and haunt others. So go check out this movie if you haven't. Number 6 spot, we have Nightmare on Elm Street. On to another slasher film, we have the 1984 version of Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven. It was the first time when we didn't feel safe in our own dreams because Freddy Krueger could just be there waiting for us. Craven also put his own little twist into this film, which made it his own. Instead of having a big muscular silent guy in a mask, he created a smaller chatty villain instead. Instead of having everyone believe nightmares were a normal, natural thing, he wanted us to believe that something worse awaits us there. Other than that, Freddy Krueger was an amazing villain. He was both brutal and gory with completely burned flesh. And the more you fear him, the higher chances he'll be waiting for you in your dreams. Although his motives were unclear, he had a very good time doing his horrific acts. You can call him a showman in a way. A very notable scene is the first bedroom murder scene. After watching it, you'll just be sitting there in complete disbelief. In the Humper list, we have Halloween. Halloween came at a good time in 1978 following the slasher hype from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas. What is most notable about Halloween is the main villain, Michael Myers. And he kills a lot in this movie. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. This movie brought violence to the front door of all those who were even slightly interested in horror movies. This movie was well feared from young boys and girls, as Halloween was a time where they were granted more freedom than usual. Except when they believe all things are good, everything changes in the matter of seconds once Michael Myers arrives. He is relentless, almost looking superhuman in many scenes. It seems that nothing can stop him, making him one of the most feared villains of all time. Imagine doing everything to stop someone and they're just walking through it all. Yup, that's Michael Myers. Number 4 spot, we have It. Everyone's favorite dancing clown is back. This movie was the sole reason for many people developing a phobia towards clowns, and if you watch the original films, then you would see why. Although it's listed as a TV miniseries, we're going to label it as a movie for the sake of the video. Many people have seen the recent adaptations of It, so the story is pretty much well known, except the 1990 version had many things that the 2017 version didn't have. First of all, they didn't have Tim Curry. His superb acting taught everyone to never talk to strangers, or might I say, clowns. His version of Pennywise doesn't appear to be outright bad from a distance, but then he'll do some unexpected things to catch the kids and even us, the viewers, off guard. This would make sense because it would actually give more reason for Georgie trusting the clown in the sewer in the first place. His Pennywise wanted to psychologically abuse you until he went on for the final kill, and let alone some of the scenes in this movie were downright unexpected. Number 3 spot, we have Child's Play. We really never thought dolls could look scary before we had Chucky. Chucky is a murderous doll who was previously a real serial killer that transferred his soul into this doll. As a doll, he tries to act innocent, but behind the scenes, he's a psychotic monster waiting for his right time to strike. I guess another reason why Chucky is feared by many is that he's just a doll. Everyone has a doll, so this made everyone believe their doll would come to life and just go on a sudden killing spree. And though Chucky has cartoonish features, he feels unexpectedly human. In the end of the movie, we also see a burnt Chucky, which is even more terrifying for those who watch. Seeing him run around after all these different characters. Number 2, Friday the 13th. Just like the other slasher films I mentioned on this list, Friday the 13th was another one of those films to propel the genre to new limits. This movie took violence and took it up a notch during a time when no other movie dared to. Other than that, it's completely shaked up the teenage population as the murders all took place within a small campground. Apart from this, many believe that the movie is overrated, and although it does have a lot of low quality production and subpar acting, we have to remember this was released in 1980. Jason Voorhees as a main antagonist was the spotlight. He was a silent killing machine, only wielding a machete and the iconic hockey mask. It's believed he has taken the lives of over 200 people over the years of his killing spree, and although he is human, he shows the craziest amounts of tolerance towards pain, and it doesn't seem like anyone stops him from getting to his goals. Who would you rather have running at you? Jason, Freddy Krueger, or Michael Myers? Pick your poison. At number 1 spot, we have The Last Exorcism. The Last Exorcism, which was released in 2010 and directed by Daniel Stamp, is one of the most iconic demonic possession movies of all time. This movie is about a religious minister who is struggling both financially and mentally. So he decided to shoot a documentary to expose the fraud within his own ministry. Except what he finds is something a lot more real than that. This is when he decides to help a fellow follower named Louis Sweetser who believed his daughter was possessed. When they arrived, she really was possessed and shit hits the fan really quickly. The demon that is present in the movie is Abalam.
If you're a horror fan like me, I'm sure you've seen the Conjuring movie series and were terrified by it. And you'll be pleased to know that the series is all based on a true story, or more specifically, the second movie of the franchise. Insane, I know. I'm your host Makayla, and today I will be walking you through the true story behind the Conjuring 2 movie, or as it's really called, the Enfield Poltergeist.
The voice was not made by the larynx, the voice box, but by the false vocal fold, which is above the larynx. And you only use that when you lose your voice and you talk like that. Well, if you talk like that for more than a couple of minutes, you start getting a sore throat. Talk like that for 5 minutes or so and you're going to start doing damage to your throat. And yet this voice used to speak up to 3 hours at a time. Not continuously, of course, but up to 3 hours at a time without the girl showing any distress at all. Absolutely.
In the movie The Conjuring 2, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren travel to England to investigate the Enfield haunting. Though the film is fictional, the alleged haunting in North London did take place in the 1970s. During that time, a single mother named Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children reported a series of bizarre incidences that happened at their home. Tons of eyewitnesses later backed them up, describing items that flew through the air, matches that spontaneously burst into flames, and a voice of an old man that spoke through one of the Hodgson's young daughters. Over time, some have come to see the Enfield Poltergeist as concrete evidence of the paranormal. Others think that the entire haunting was orchestrated by the family who lived in the home. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more spooky and scary content. But without further ado, let's get started with the story. According to Peggy Hodgson, the haunting of her home at 284 Green Street, Enfield in North London, started in August 1977. Peggy, who lived there with her 4 children, Margaret, who was 12, Janet, who was 11, Johnny, who was 10, and Billy, who was 7, claimed that she first knew something was up after there was a loud crash upstairs in the home. When Peggy went to investigate, she found Margaret and Janet petrified in the corner of their bedroom. "We told her mom the chest of the drawers was moving toward the bedroom door," Janet said. She said, "Oh, don't be silly." But the chest then slid across the room. "I just couldn't believe it," Peggy said. "In fact, I pushed it back twice, and a third time I couldn't move it." As a strange knocking noise seemed to spread through the house, Peggy went to get help. She first reached out to a neighbor and then the police. When Police Constable Carolyn Heaps arrived on the scene, she said that she witnessed a chair moving on its own. "It came off the floor, maybe a half inch, I should say," Heaps recalled.
It came off the floor, or maybe a half inch, I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
And I saw it slide off to the right about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. As time went on, the strange events at the home seemed to escalate more and more. The Enfield poltergeist seemed particularly focused on 11-year-old Janet. Quote, "I was used and abused," Janet recalled. "Some unknown force," she said, "yanked her through the air and forced her to levitate." Additionally, Janet began speaking in the creepy voice of an older man. Quote, "Just before I died, I went blind, and then I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep and I died in that chair in the corner downstairs," the voice said through Janet on recorded audio. Chillingly, a former occupant of the house named Bill Wilkins had passed in that same exact way years earlier. In total, over 30 people also claimed to have experienced some kind of paranormal event during the Enfield haunting. They include reporters, police officers, lawyers, psychic researchers, and of course, the Hodgson family. But not everyone was convinced that the Enfield poltergeist was real. Some believed that Janet and her siblings faked the entire thing. One of the many reasons that the haunted house in Enfield became such a worldwide sensation was because many of the paranormal events took place inside the home were captured on film. One image shows her midair in a seemingly impossible leap. 2 of the investigators in the Society for Psychical Research case maintained that they believed the haunting was genuine and caught many of the now infamous images on film. Much of the equipment used in their investigation was often found to be malfunctioning upon entering the Hodgson household, despite working perfectly well beforehand. However, Janet was found to have hidden a tape recorder and was videotaped bending spoons on another occasion. Janet, however, admitted to doing so, but she said her siblings were just trying to see if anyone could tell the difference, and Janet insists that they faked paranormal events just, quote, 2% of the time. The investigators believe that much of the activity surrounding the Enfield ghost was genuine. However, they suspect that some of the occurrences were exaggerated by Janet for increased attention by reporters. For example, someone said that Bill, one of the voices Janet became most well known for, had some similar vocal tics and habits to Janet, such as changing the topic of conversation often. Graham Morris, a Daily Mirror photographer who also visited the house at the family's request, described, quote, "chaos," saying things started flying around, people were screaming. Morris himself even got hit by a flying Lego. By 1978, the Enfield haunting had attracted the attention of American paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. As depicted in the Conjuring 2 film, the Warrens came to England to investigate what was happening, though their involvement was not as expansive as it was in the film. In fact, the Warrens were only there for 1 day. The Warrens did study the case and conclude that it was an authentic haunting. Now, you couldn't record the dangerous, threatening atmosphere inside the little house, Ed Warren later said, but you could film the levitations, teleportations, and dematerializations of people and objects that were happening there, not to mention the many hundreds of hours of tape recordings made of these spirit voices speaking out loud in the rooms. What's the most terrifying part of this whole thing, you might ask? It is captured on video that is still accessible today. So buckle up because I'm about to make your skin crawl. On one instance, Janet's voice went from this.
How does it feel to be haunted by a poltergeist?
It's not haunted. Shut up.
Why isn't it haunted?
I don't know.
Does it frighten you, the things that happen here?
Oh, well, it did first, but now I've got more used to it. And you learn to accept the things that happen. It slang covered it, Mum. My idiot Mum. Slung a bookshelf at my ear.
Have you tried telling it to go away?
Yes,
Yeah,
many
no
times.
answer, nothing.
And what does it reply?
No, it won't. It's staying another 6-7 years.
To this.
I was going to ask the same question as I asked earlier. How many voices are there?
600.
600 the voices.
I know the joke.
How many really are there, Margaret?
I think so far we've had 10
Three.
sensible voices. But the rest of the names are absolute rubbish.
Now that was the first time we heard the voice, and since then we've been hearing it again and again, and it's been getting louder and louder.
Then, after a year and a half of activity, the phenomena at the Enfield house abruptly came to an end. No one really knew why though, but these sorts of hauntings are common with poltergeists. They stop, they start, and the family gets back to normal. During that year and a half, the family could not find a source of any of these activities, at least in the beginning. Whether or not the Hodgson family was telling the whole truth remains to be unknown, but people still can't come up with a reasonable explanation for the Bill story. Can you? Let us know what you think happened in the comments below, and we will see you next time.